So, last week when I was working on this talk, I got an email with a pretty incredible offer. And I read it a bunch of times because, you know, it just seems too good to be true. And apparently there was this guy who's managing a bank account that belongs to the late Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. It has 20 million euro in it. And the late owner has no next of kin, so if I work with that person, then they can help me get half the money. I just need to give them a little money to help smooth the things out. And he just asked me for a few hundred euro, but you know, if I get 10 million, you know, it's worth it. And of course, like a bunch of people laughed already halfway because, you know, of course, this is a scam. This is like, if I pay them the money, I'll never hear from them again. And you might wonder, like, you know, what kind of idiots actually fall for these kind of scams, right? Because, you know, it's so obvious. They're not even obvious. They are, the very idea that someone falls for them is a joke to us. You know, that's why when I started the story, when I was only halfway, you already started talking. Because you knew I was going to make a joke. But the thing is that people actually do fall for these scams all the time, like every single day, and lots of others like it, like the phishing emails full of typos that are so obvious to some of us. And the reason that it's funny to many of us, and that it's harder to see, like, you know, who would actually fall for this, is that it's much harder for us to be empathic with the different kinds of people that use all this kind of technology and receive these kind of scams today. Because these scams, they're not mostly for people like come to a conference like this, people that are affected more, for example, people with dementia, people with memory issues, elderly, lonely people, and they're all people who are more easily pulled into such a story. Maybe they are less likely to remember warnings from their family, they might be creating the interaction more. And these people are losing their money. This happens every day. They are being harmed directly by this. To us as a developer group, these victims of these things, they're basically a punchline joke. And sometimes those kind of things make me feel a bit like this tweet. Programming has such massive power and potential to change the world, and as a community we are squandering it, showing the rest of the world that we aren't worthy of it. I hate it. And those words are very strong. I don't always feel this negative about things I do. And I am being a little harsh because you didn't personally create these scams, right? You didn't personally create and knowingly create technology that facilitated this. But when we design products or code or conferences or communities, we are making them not just for ourselves, but for a lot of other people as well. And the values that we use to design them, they set examples to many others. And that also means that we have a responsibility to be empathic to other people's needs and situations. And it's really hard, but we also do it very poorly. And these problems are very difficult. None of us can actually solve these on our own, but everyone here has a chance to make an impact. And with this talk, I will show you some of the how and the why. So I jumped right in. Not everyone knows me, so I'll quickly introduce myself. If you see me on Slack or Twitter, you will recognize this squirrel. It is a long story. And so my name is Sasha. I work for a dash care in Amsterdam. It's a small Python company, and I do a lot of work around Django. So I'm very involved in the community. It's the most popular Python web framework. I'm a Django team member, organize Django conferences. I'm in the Code Content community of the Django Software Foundation, and a lot of other things. And the best way I have ever been insulted on the internet was when someone called me a neoliberal emotional crusader because I cared about people's well-being. It's very confusing, right? But so one of my other projects, which you might have seen yesterday morning, is with my friend Mikey here. We run a project called Open Source Happiness Packets. And it's a very simple platform in which we try to get people to reach out to each other with kind words in the community. Because, you know, it's so much easier for us to share negative things. This is a platform to share more kindness. We've got 100 messages sent, so I'm sure there are people also in this community that you're grateful to, other people that you've seen speak, people that you've met. So I encourage you to send them a happiness packet. We have stickers also and cards, because it makes a huge difference to both the person you're sending it to, but also to yourself. And so, back to empathy. Empathy as a feeling is something that we all know. it's something that you experience a lot of time when you feel for someone who is hurt, for someone who is happy. It can be physical pain, mental pain, or some other emotions like when you're reading other people in that way. If you have no empathy at all, then your problems are more complicated than this topic can fix. But for example, if the developer that you work with has been staring at their screen uninterrupted for the last hour and they have their headphones on and they're just only moving their fingers, then if you're also a developer, you probably know what that's like. You know, they're very focused. This is probably a poor time to interrupt them for something non-urgent. And empathy is also, it's something that's very much not exact, because our perception of other people's feelings, their experiences, their emotions, what they're going through, what they need, it is incredibly incomplete. It is very inaccurate, and so it means that you're going to make a lot of errors. And to make it worse, it's not just full of errors, it's also full of error in a particular direction, because it's also full of bias. Because when we try to understand someone else's emotions or their experience, we consider that from our own perspective. And because we all have our own different experiences and memories and the associated feelings with that, it is through those of our own that we are able to understand others. But it introduces a lot of bias because it means that how we relate to the feelings of others is biased by our own past. And it means that the bigger the difference between our experiences and those of someone else, the harder it is to understand them, the more likely it is that we make bad assumptions or cause confusion or even hurt people. So if my example of working focused with your headphones is familiar to you and you work in an office, you're probably also familiar with people who just don't get it, that you're very focused, that you cannot be disturbed now, and other people will just come in and take you out of your focus for something really trivial that could have waited. And more often these people have different kinds of tasks. They could be in management, maybe in sales, things like that. And your first idea might be like, you know, why doesn't this person get it? And like, sure, these salespeople, you know, they're such idiots, it's obvious, right? Why do they have to disturb me? And in a way, it's obvious to you if you have that experience, and it's very easily obvious to you when someone else does exactly the same thing. Because they're similar to you in that part of their behavior. But the other one is like, if people who don't do like those kind of focused tasks, they just don't always realize the impact of what they're doing. They just don't know. Because they don't share their experience. And then people get kind of frustrated, you know, why does this other person not get it? Why do they have to bother me? People bring these kind of things up when they're full of frustration because, you know, it's been going on for so long and this person just doesn't seem to be getting it. And then, even then, when you explain these kind of things, it's hard for someone else to understand it. Like, they're just like, they get this look in their eyes that they're like, they understand what you're saying, but it doesn't really make sense to them. And you know, it's better for a while, sometimes it gets worse for a while, and everybody ends up frustrated. And maybe this is a little exaggerated, but it's something that I hear a lot from developers as like, it's one of their common irritations about office work. But I also don't think that the people who do this, these structures, they're malicious, but they lack an experience that I have, that a lot of developers have, and it makes it much harder for them, even when they have good intentions. It makes it easier for them to forget. It makes it easier for them to not understand the impact of it. And it basically requires more effort from them than would require from me. And it's like, this is a really common issue, and also part of why I wrote this talk. And these kinds of issues go both ways all the time. Like, we are hurt by people that find it hard to understand us. But this happens, we do this to other people all the time also. One of my friends used to do classes for beginners in programming. And he had a student, this student had taken a whole bunch of these classes, and he just never managed to work it out. It just didn't click. And somewhere in the class, the student said, oh, like, now I get it. If you write lines of code, they will be executed in that order from top to bottom. And that just never occurred to that student. And of course, if you don't understand that concept, programming is very confusing to you. And probably nobody else realized that this was the thing that this student didn't understand, and probably they weren't able to articulate well enough. And I'm pretty sure if I was doing that course, it would never have occurred to me that that was the thing somebody didn't understand. So yeah, it's like, now I figured it out, so he was able to learn more. But in a way, like, it is so obvious that this is how programming works, that it's so easy to forget. And that's a funny example, but there's a lot of more serious things too. In the Netherlands we have a holiday called Sinterklaas, sort of related to Santa Claus, not really. And Sinterklaas is depicted here. He has, by definition, he is a white man with a white beard. He rides his white horse, and he rides the roofs of all the homes, and then his helpers bring gifts for the children down through the chimney. All his helpers look like this. Usually including particularly the pitch black makeup, red lipstick, golden earrings, these kind of hats. And this is something I grew up with. Like, this is something that as a child, you know, that's just the way it is. The story is that supposedly they look this way because of the soot in the chimneys. I don't know if you see a chimney worker, but they don't come out like that. And so, only in recent years there's been like a lot more protests against this to change this, because to me it makes totally sense that this is really racist. And a lot of Dutch people, they understand poorly and they say, oh, you know, but I didn't mean it in a racist way. Oh, there's like, you can make up all sorts of stories of why is this originally this way. And so a lot of even the more moderate supporters of keeping this as it is, they say, you know, you can interpret it in a racist way, but we didn't mean it that way. It is essentially a white dude who owns a bunch of people who are made to look identical to slaves from the Dutch colonial past. There is no link to racism. Just coincidence. But an important distinction is that intent in these kind of things isn't magic. So intent does not excuse behavior, but it can explain it. So the fact that you didn't mean it this way that doesn't suddenly make it not racist. And so I do believe there's a very important difference between people who act maliciously and people who are just inept, they just don't know. And it's not a binary division, there's a large gray area. And that distinction to me is useful because they benefit from different approaches and have it for different reasons. So let's look at this example from an open source chat channel. Hey folks, do you think it's safe to use third-party apps to integrate with PayPal? Yes, unless you source them from China, Russia, or Nigeria. I don't consider racial stereotyping as being racist. You wouldn't be wrong to be suspicious about it. And so to me, this is a very good example of maliciousness, or at least it's behavior where no reasonable person could argue that this is okay, that this is within any reasonable code of conduct. I just think it's really messed up. And I don't think any of the people in this slide were unaware of the impact of their behavior. I don't think any of them believed that they were being inclusive and welcoming and not discriminatory to other people. I believe they didn't care, but not that they didn't know. So like this is the kind of people that call me a neoliberal emotional crusader. And another example from a mailing list. I bet even pro developers have good intentions with the reply, they are good at hiding it. This is from the PSF community. And it's to me a good example of inept people. Like, imagine you are a pro developer, you're starting to be fighting, you come to the community list, and it's like one of the first things you see. It's just unwelcoming. I also still don't get the joke. But I think these people were just oblivious to the kind of effect their language would have on other people. I don't think they were intentionally trying to exclude. And I do want to stress again that intent isn't magic, so doing something out of ineptness doesn't mean it's suddenly okay, but it's different. And that's also why if you have public policies, for example, they have a range of options from like talk to the person to ban them forever, for sure. But many instances are much, much lighter. And speaking of codes of conduct, I do feel very strongly about having them, and I'm a very vocal advocate of them. And my strong position is basically that refusing to adopt a code of conduct displays an appalling lack of even the slightest interest or awareness in making people feel safe or welcome in your community. So to me, if you can't even be bothered to write down that harassment and exclusionary behavior and things like that are not acceptable, and you're not willing to set up a process to deal with those kind of things, then you're basically permitting it, almost encouraging it. But because of my strong views, sometimes I end up in discussions with people about this, and sometimes I need a lot of skepticism, and usually it's along the lines of, geez, the code of conduct is full of sexist and harassment and gender did people really act as savages before the last few years' wave of political correctness isn't be kind, be polite toward other people enough? It turns out people did not actually act as savages before the wave of political correctness. And in an ideal world, of course, saying be kind, be polite, that would be enough. But often, when I talk more to these kinds of people that start out with this position, and I tell more stories, they often start understanding a bit of like, why is this so important, and why is this only a starting point? It's not even enough on its own, but it's a good place to start. And one of the things that I found is that there's a fundamental aspect of being part of a community that these people are entirely unaware of. Something that I do experience, and that unawareness often underlies their initial skepticism because, and in a way, it's something that's so obvious to me that I would never think of explaining it to someone. Everybody knows this, right? And so yeah, now it's like one of the first things I bring up. And it relates to the examples of scams I mentioned earlier, and then it's also a failure of empathy, often not because people are malicious, but because it's hard. Which is that one of the aspects is that things can be very different if you're part of a marginalized group or a minority, whether that's visible or invisible. Because as I said, understanding people who are not like you is harder, but these kinds of lack of understanding disproportionately affect marginalized people. And to me it has a fundamental but often overlooked way in the way we interact with each other's communities, because our empathy towards other people is so biased from our own experiences. It's something that some people are entirely unaware of. There's just a whole aspect of being part of a community that is just not known. And that creates a fundamentally different interpretation and projection of things, even when people have their best intentions. Of course, there's not a binary thing. There are many different kinds of marginalized groups. There's massive variation in the people actually inside these groups. This can also happen between people in different marginalized groups, so it's complicated. But one of the reasons for this is that our community does not exist in a vacuum. So things that happen outside our community, they influence the attitudes, the perceptions, the emotions of people inside it. So even if inside the community space everyone's being perfectly nice, that doesn't entirely remove this. And for a lot of groups, things inside our community aren't always great. But things outside our community can often be worse in many ways. For example, this is a map. All the countries in red have legislation to execute me if I were to enter them. Slightly lighter states have somewhere between a few years and a few decades of imprisonment, which is because I'm not straight, and that's a reason for all these countries to have legislation to want to execute, torture, or imprison me. Now, of course, I'm currently in one of the yellow countries. This map is a little old, so I'm not sure that's still correct. And so this is actually an incredibly optimistic view. It only looks at explicit criminal laws. It doesn't look at if you are assaulted because you are not straight, will the police actually help you, or will you just like, fast for it? Also, of course, the US shouldn't be quite so positive here. Chechnya is yellowish, but has actual concentration camps for queer people. So like, these are things that you're aware of. And also, I'm a trans woman, so like one of the concerns that are on my mind also when I go to conferences is things like using a bathroom, which is something that a lot of people never have to think about. Some US states are explicitly basically trying to make it entirely unsafe for trans people to use a bathroom. In Europe, things are unpredictable. So I haven't actually been confronted with any violence yet, like this picture, but it's, I have experienced threatening behavior. And just like this weird behavior is not uncommon at all. And this is exactly the kind of thing that, unless you've been in that situation, is something that would never occur to you. That is a thing that, that can be part of your daily life. But I say that, but it does sound really dark. Sometimes it is. But I'm also aware that I'm still in a very fortunate and privileged position compared to a lot of other people, trans and not trans. There's cool things too, and I'll get back to one of those later. But first you might wonder, like, why am I actually talking about this, and how is this relevant? Because it's actually quite likely that nobody in this room believes I should be executed or tortured for sexuality, gender identity. Pretty safe that some people at this conference will disapprove, but whatever. But even if everyone is being perfectly nice, it's still not the same because the bad experiences that you've had or that other people have even had, they don't just disappear when you enter the movement building. They're things that you carry with you, that you think about. And that can make it harder for a lot of marginalized groups to feel welcome or included or safe. And it's not just the classic groups that we might think of, like women, people of color, basically the two classic groups we think of, but also people who've had a history with abuse. For them, it can be harder to trust people, it can be harder to feel safe in a public place or in certain situations. Even if all these people have been perfectly and flawlessly nice. And I saw a tweet recently that captured this idea pretty well, although a bit dark. There's nothing worse than being able to hear the hate in your own head even before anyone has had a chance to speak. When you can't escape it, even when everyone around is being nice, because it's everywhere. I don't actually feel this dark, fortunately, but I get this. And to me, it shows sometimes to really make marginalized groups feel welcome, we need to go beyond, like, you're not actively being harassed at this event. It's a little beyond being nice and win someone's trust, even when their trust has been violated in other spaces, like ours. I actually had a long list of horrible behavior and things that I have to cut it out for time, and we could literally talk about that the rest of the day. But we will all feel miserable, so, that's not great. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're being nice to everyone, that's pretty good. We should keep doing that. I try to do that too. But it doesn't mean that we're just done there. And it applies to me as much as to anyone else, because even being part of some marginalized groups, it's easy for me to develop blind spots for other people and develop my own bias in my own people. So, the issues I talk about are also not something that we can just opt out of, whether it's about situations for marginalized people specifically, or empathy with people who are different from ourselves in general. So I've heard people argue to me that they just want to focus on writing the code, and then me and my friends can fix our community and do all the events and make everything nice and inclusive. But there is no such separation, because we are all part of how other people feel inside our community. Every interaction that we have with someone else matters, and it shapes how they see us. And that's not an impact that's limited to communities and social interactions. It also affects all the things we make too, which are being used by such a diverse group of people nowadays. And also the things we make, they set examples of values to others. And that makes me think that it's essential that we strive for diversity and inclusivity in every aspect. Because if we know that the more different someone is from us, the harder it is for us to empathize with them. It means if you build a product with a team of all the same people, it's going to empathize terribly with people who aren't exactly like your small group of people. And I say every aspect because this is not just about race or gender. You can also see things like health status, or income situation, or housing, or education opportunities, having dependents, all ways in which I am actually very privileged. A nice way to look at this also is this diagram from Microsoft's inclusivity team, and it highlights a few personas that are often forgotten in our projects, so more than others. There are some weird graphics, but I like how it shows that even though very few of your users actually have one arm, that's not a common scenario, but people who have a temporary or situational inhibition to use one of their arms are actually really common. The same as when you make a product work for people who can't hear, it's not just for people who have no hearing, it's also someone who is in a loud environment. So you have to theories in how many people are there really that are non-verbal? Not that many. But if you look at the situational and temporary aspects of this, you make your product much more accessible to a lot of people, and this is something that's often overlooked. And so having diverse people on your team, and in the community, in the organization of competence, on the stage of competence, and actually listening to them, gives you perspectives that would never have occurred to you. And it'll make products better for more people as well. And so I really like this hiring approach. I'm pushing people to think less about culture fit and more about culture and how will a new hire add to your culture, rather than be the same as everyone else. Because so many of us, including myself in many ways, we are still in very privileged and luxurious positions. Like, I don't have to worry. I'm going to pay for my food tonight. That's not a luxury everyone has. For me, it's just like, whatever. I just have money. I don't have to worry who will take care of my children while I'm at this conference. And so, because it's harder to understand people who are less like you, it's also harder for me to understand people who do have some of these issues, because I've just not experienced them at all. On the other hand, there's no way I would ever screw up anything that relates to gender. So, I'm now in the organization of a conference, and when it comes to any questions about gender, or how we should ask about that in a forum, or how we should label bathrooms, everybody asks me that, because I know all of this very well. I see it go wrong all the time. So I know all the options and all the up and down sides. But when it comes to childcare, I'm absolutely useless. I know nothing about this. It's like, to me, it's like, all I know is that children are like people, but smaller. But, beyond that. So when we do that, actually, none of the team of the current conference, none of us are parents. So we just put out a call and said, like, if you benefit from childcare, then help us, like, figure out what helps you. Because if we would try to pick it would be useless. Last time I tried it, I took the whole wrong age group almost. So that's how bad I am at this. So, but I know this, and I know I won't understand these needs as well as an actual parent. So we try to involve people who have this experience, and that way I can also learn. If I've done this a bunch of times, then I'll understand more. I'll heard more from these people, and I'll do it. Maybe I can do better next time. And so if we design products in a team with more empathy, we're more likely to create products that only work for us and only work in small sets of situations, and we might not understand how they feel for others, which can have very significant impacts that are also often under-recognized. So this is the driveway of a house in Baldwin, Kansas, sort of in the middle of the United States. This is a broken toilet which was dumped in their driveway by unknown strangers in seeking some kind of vague threat about something. And their house has also been searched by the FBI, by federal marshals looking for escaped convicts, by tax collectors, the police searching for runaway children, and lots more. At some point, apparently, every 2 weeks or so, they have a police raid on their house. So you might wonder, like, what did these people deserve then? Broken toilets and police raids? And it turns out there's this geolocation database called MaxMind. They estimate locations for IP addresses. So, you give them an IP address and say, it's sort of here. It's pretty rough. And for about 600 million addresses, the level of detail they can give you is like somewhere in the US. They don't even know the state, it's somewhere in the US. And so they give you back an address which says US, no other information, and they give you coordinates so you can follow it on the map and they'll look nice. And for the coordinates of somewhere in the US, they picked a geographical center, then rounded the numbers, which is this house. And so they involved the journalists, because of course these people, they don't know anything about geolocation databases. So journalists eventually figured all this out, and so they asked MaxMind, these people could have died because of your database. And they said, yeah, it didn't occur to us that people would do that people would locate down to a household level. We just thought it was for city or zip code level. And so it never occurred to them that you make a website and a police officer enters an IP address and you give them coordinates that they would raid that house. It never occurred to them. I think it could have died. Fortunately they didn't, but... And so Silicon Valley is full of examples with this. Like, you could come up with a new one every 10 minutes. But one of my favorites is Apple Health. So Apple Health tracks healthcare data. It's tracking my heart rate right now to see how my heart rate develops during my talk. And so when it launched, it would track obvious things like your heart rate, your weight, but also some more obscure things that many of us don't measure: your blood alcohol level, your cholesterol, your inhaler use. But there was something interesting missing, which wasn't just some metric for people with rare diseases, because somehow the entire team that built this managed to forget that about half the world menstruates at some point in their life. It didn't allow you to track menstrual cycles, which is important to a lot of people, more probably than inhaler use. And it's also been tracked longer than phones have existed, so it's not a new thing people do. And so it took a full year for them to actually start implementing this. Security also has a lot of this. if you dismiss threats related to local access or knowing a victim's password, spent 15 minutes with any divorce lawyer in 2017. So there's a lot of this insecurity also. I've made this assumption in the past also, like, local access, you're basically lost. But it's just not good enough, and there's a lot of scenarios that increasingly for which this is important. Because the scenarios that affect me and the products that I use and the way I use them, they can be so drastically different from those of other people. So if I think of security only from my own usage scenario and my own risks, it's going to break sometimes very drastically for people who are not me in ways that aren't obvious to me. And also there's the assumptions about impact of security compromise. So there's a dating website called Ashley Medicine. They don't use this slogan anymore, but this way it's clearer. So it's marketed to people who want to cheat on their partner discreetly. Discretion is sort of their thing. And in 2015, all their account data was breached. Every single account on the website, all the payment data, lots of it was published on the internet. And maybe your first thought, it was definitely my first thought at the time, was like, maybe they sort of deserve it, right? If you cheat on your partner knowingly, then, maybe you deserve this. But this was actually looked at the site was made for. People who cheat on their partner, but they weren't the only people using it, because it was also a site, as a site for finding a partner discreetly, it was also used by gay people, and the breach included accounts of several thousands of people, men, looking for other men in countries where just looking is a reason for torture or execution. So, initially you might think like, tough luck, but it turns out people could have died because of this, because people didn't consider this in their security model. I'm sure nobody there thought about this kind of use case and the impact it would have to have data breached. And so there are so many more vulnerable groups where they are just more vulnerable in a way that means that a scenario like this can affect them so much more than other people, sometimes with very great consequences. And it means that even with our best intentions, it's very easy to cause harm to them. So, also role models and representation are incredibly important in building up this kind of culture and to build up a healthy community. Because a very big factor we have in believing that we can do something is seeing someone else do it, and the more they are like us, the more it contributes to our own belief to be able to do this. And this affects more people who are surrounded by exclusion or in a culture that tells you, who grew up in a way where you're not supposed to do certain things. It might be because of gender, it might be because of the circumstances in which you grew up, it might be because you've been in an abusive relationship which poured out a lot of your self-confidence. And there are so many circumstances which can make it very hard for people to believe in themselves. And so it can very much contribute for people if they have someone that they can look up to and say, look, you can still do this. Someone like me can do this, and so maybe I can do it too. It's one of the reasons for me to be very open about sexuality, gender identity, class, mental health, because I know there are other people who relate to that, and I know to other people it can contribute to their own belief. And so that's why I take the risks that come with that, because it can help someone else. And to also show that, you can be me and you can still do all these things, so someone else can do it too. And to instill some of that belief in someone. And I talked before about being queer and being trans in a bit of a dark way, but also one of my favorite things is that I'm like a little more outside of gender expectations for people, is that I can really expand the way other people think. Like I've had several friends of mine who suddenly felt a lot more comfortable expressing themselves in more gender flexible ways because they knew me and they saw me do it, and they're like, oh, you can just do this. And then they always wanted to do this, but they never thought it was a thing you could just do. And then they see someone else, and suddenly they're much more themselves. It's really fun. But in that way, I can only be a tiny part because I'm just one person. But for every person that can be a role model to others, there are other people and people that you'll probably never know about, that will feel more comfortable being themselves, that feel more at home in the community, and they will draw in other people as well. They will reduce the rate at which people leave the community, which is also an issue in tech and in open source. And that in turn makes it easier for all of us to hire a culture at rather than a culture fit, because there is more people that will be culture at. Um, so one way to make a big impact for groups that we easily forget and overlook is to try to be someone's hero from time to time, or heroine. And that might seem like a big responsibility, but when there are opportunities for this, it's really not that hard. So, for example, when people say hurtful things about someone, it can be very hard for that person to bring that up and to go against that and address that. I know this from experience. Like, I shut up sometimes because I just don't want to spend the energy. But there's definitely an opportunity for other people to rise up and just say, hey, that's not cool. This is essentially the role of code of conduct in a lot of incidents, to speak for someone who is emotionally harmed by something and represent them in a way. Which can be like talking to the person who did that. It can be helping mediate between the two of them. It depends like what kind of thing it is. And this doesn't just apply to marginalized groups and individual cases. And to the experience I described, but it's for any group that we easily forget. Like, because we can't represent every kind of minority and marginalized group in every team. There's just too many of them. But when your team designs a product, you can be the person that says, hey, you know, with an hour or two of work, we can make this much more accessible for people with visual impairments, people who don't have full use of their hands at the time, all kinds of things like that. Because, you know, you still talk about it at PyCon. In a way, you can amplify the voices of people that are part of groups that we often forget. Sort of like this tweet. Love to everyone in my life who is actively trying to change you guys to something more inclusive. It's hard and it means a lot to me. And so in a way, I'd like to encourage you to make use of your privilege as an opportunity, because having privilege, which many of us have in at least some ways, it can make it much easier to be inept and oblivious to things, often unintentionally. But in a way, it also makes you more powerful. It means you get away with stuff that other people don't. It means they might accept a more aggressive tone from you in something, and that they won't dismiss your opinion so easily. And that gives you the power to be a more powerful hero for other people. Like for me, because I'm sort of self-employed, people complaining to my employer about what I say and trying to get me fired, this is not a risk at all. So I can say more things that upset people more because they don't like to hear them. And basically I can say things that are more controversial that some other people can afford to do, because for them this is a risk. They might get fired. Maybe it's harder for them to find a new job than for me. And so there's so many dimensions to this in which I get away with stuff that other people don't, and some people get away with stuff that I don't. And also when you're trying to be a hero for someone or for some group, or you're just trying to better understand people that are different from you, helping someone to welcome, there's a vital skill, which is to listen. And when it comes to the subject, there's one issue that always comes back, other than the fact that truly listening to someone is just hard. But there's one particular reason, which is why I sometimes keep quiet about things, which is not believing people. Like when someone says, hey, you know, this thing happened, and it was very hurtful to me, that, you know, it's very easy to think like, well, I wouldn't be hurt by that. So I don't think you were. I don't believe that you were hurt by that, because why would you be hurt by that? It doesn't make any sense. And it's very easy to dismiss the other person's feeling, basically, and the harm that was done to them, or that people get responded to with doubt that, like, doesn't happen at all. Like, surely that wouldn't happen at our conference. Or like, but this person is such a nice person, like, surely they wouldn't do such a thing. And so a lot of disbelief. You might be surprised, or perhaps not at all, if your experience is how typical it is for people to simply deny your experience and your feelings. And those other people. When I do code of conduct work, this is like one of the focus points, that in our initial contact with someone, we don't commit to what we will do, but we will react in a way, like we don't start questioning it, and like, oh, is that true? Did it really happen? Or this, what were you wearing? Like, we keep it very neutral and like make them, we may not be able to come to the solution that they'd like. But it's important that, especially at first contact, they feel we understand, we heard them, we take them very seriously, and we listen to them, that they feel listened to. So, like I saw recently in a tweet, if you don't hear about your friends and colleagues' experience with sexism, chances are they don't think it's safe to share them with you. If you think the explanation is rather, they don't experience any sexism, they are right to think so. And so another angle to this is that we need to make it safe for people to ask for help. Because many of us, I have a whole section about this in another talk, we can be reluctant in asking for things we need. But it also is, making it safe to ask for help also means doing more than just me telling you, coming to conferences all the time and telling people like, oh, it's okay to ask for help. We need to make spaces where people feel safe, where it is safe to ask that way, and where people feel that way, which isn't always the same thing. Like, people's perception of a space can be different. It's colored by a lot of their own background compared to what the space actually is. It needs to be a space where people trust that they will be listened to, that they won't be ridiculed for the way they feel or something that they don't understand. Because in your past, people may have said or implied that you were dumb for not knowing something, that you didn't understand something, and that, like, you know, might as well quit programming if you don't understand this now. And if it relates to feelings, people can say that you're oversensitive, too easily offended, you shouldn't take it so seriously, it was just a joke, you shouldn't talk about these things, and then it'll just disappear. I've heard them all, and it makes it much harder for people to speak up next time. But it also means that to make a change in things like this, you can start small. Like, it doesn't have to be a massive project. It can be as simple as a conference that said in their newsletter a few days before, that said, we want to underline that our conference is a place where you can ask any question confidently, whoever you are. And by saying something like this, it's not just that it gives me more confidence that I can admit that I don't know something, and don't do it. It also means that if it does happen, the organizers have my back. That this is not a conference policy to ridicule people who don't know something or who are hurt by something, but I might just have encountered an unpleasant person. But the organizers, this is how they feel, and they publicly support that. So I also mentioned examples in this talk of a bunch of people who might be more sensitive, and they might be more vulnerable to our actions, people that we often forget about in our community. People who have something different in their situation that makes it harder for others to empathize with them, that makes it harder for them to feel at home in a community like this. And I've shared some of the things with you that in my experience can help, but I can only be a very tiny part of this. And there are many more stories to tell, there are many more experiences to learn from. And with every person that shares their story in something like this, we gain a bit of new perspective, right? We gain a bit of new understanding. You see the world from a different angle, and it helps you understand the next person better because you have such a wide perspective. And so when I wrote the first abstract for this talk, I thought I was just going to give people a 10-point to-do list of like, here's how to be more empathic, just do these 10 things. And then as I wrote it, I found like none of this is that simple. This will never work because people are a lot more complicated than that. And so what I try to do in this talk is not so much give a simple to-do list for being an empathic person, because it's also not a single thing, right? It's a continuous thing that you do. But I hope that the stories and some of the ideas that I share are an inspiration to think about this a bit more, and to think about people who are different from you, and how they can be from different backgrounds, they can have been through different things in their lives, and to stop and think not only about how you would perceive something yourself, but also how would this come across to someone else? How would this work for someone else? And I hope it's also an inspiration to other people, perhaps one of you, to share some of your own story, because to share what the world looks like from your place, because I'm sure it's very different from mine, and it has different struggles, it has different challenges, it has different things that we see, and how it can be so different from the person sitting next to you even. And sharing these kind of stories and opening ourselves up is a kind of vulnerability. And vulnerability is often something that we consider a bit of a bad word, right? It's a dangerous thing. It is, yeah, it's just like, it's not, you have to be careful of being vulnerable, but that doesn't always have to be true. Because I saw this from a TED talk, which I recommend, The Power of Vulnerability, in which he said, I know that vulnerability is kind of the core of shame and fear, and our struggle for worthiness, but it appears it is also the birthplace of joy, of creativity, of belonging, and of love. I'm not trying to force you to be vulnerable, of course. It is always okay to set your own limits, to choose for your own safety, and it's not selfish to help yourself before you help someone else. If it's necessary. And none of this is easy, right? This is something I've done experienced while writing this talk, but also while trying to do the things that I promote in this talk. And there's a lot of gray areas. There are very few simple answers. But compassionate empathy can actually be their most valuable exactly when they are difficult. Sometimes it's also easier to treat others with gentleness and compassion than it is to treat ourselves with that. Because we will make mistakes. And when it comes to any of this, like even when you have the best intentions and you try to do your best, we're going to make mistakes with things like this. And sometimes people might call you out on them, they might suggest ways to do better. And sometimes that feels uncomfortable. And your first thought might be to close up, to fight them, to defend against it. And I've certainly experienced that myself also, that sometimes I feel this and I'm like, I have to let this go for a moment. And sometimes you might call out other people. And I've been on all sides of this plenty of times. And I can tell you, it's hard, and it slowly gets easier, but it remains hard, these kind of things. They're complicated, it involves a lot of feelings, it involves a lot of our past. So we will make mistakes when it comes to empathy, but when we do, let's try to look at them as opportunities to learn and to grow, to gain a new perspective that makes it easier for us to understand others in the future, that makes it easier for us to understand ourselves in the future. Because in a way, to err, to learn, and to grow is simply the cost of being human. And that's it. I finished pretty early.
Thanks, Sasha, for your talk. And so we have quite a few minutes for questions. Please, raise your hand.
Do you have... thank you for the great talk. Do you have any tips when arguing about why a certain behavior might be wrong?
That's a difficult one. I usually actually don't take questions for this talk, because usually there's like not enough time. It's like either this is a shitty question or this question is fascinating but complicated, as yours is.
Sorry.
Yeah. I guess like if you're considering like, is this thing that happened, is that okay, is it not? In a way, often that lands with a code of conduct team. And they are supposed to have, so one thing is the distance you have to it. So if you are one of the involved people, or if you're closely involved with those people, it's very hard to get even a remotely neutral viewpoint. A third party, which knows the situation as best as they can, they would probably be the best person to mediate in such a case. And say like, yes, it violates the boundaries, or no, it does not, or somewhere in between. I guess that way. And like, if your code of conduct team is arguing inside about whether or not this violates, then you have other issues. I personally never encountered this. Like, I've had discussion of like, that we some sort of disagree, but virtually every time I've dealt with code of conduct issues in a team, we were like pretty much on the same line. It was like some fine tuning, and something felt a bit more that way, something felt a bit more that way, but I don't think I've ever been like exactly across from someone else. That would be a very strange situation for me, because then you are very poorly aligned with each other and with what you're trying to do.
You talked a little bit about the importance of having diversity in the design of a product and the building of a product, so that people can feel represented and like understand the product better. How do you build a team, or how do you encourage the team to grow in a way that has that composition?
Yes, it's also a complicated one.
Yeah, I thought so.
This is not my main expertise. So for one, it's like building a team and building an atmosphere that is not actively hostile is part of it. So if you're to iterate something that might say this about alcohol, if your website of job ads says like, oh yeah, every Friday we get drunk together, I would run away from that. And I drink, I like to drink. So there's like, for one, there's like a lot of habits we have about like whether people are expected to, or like basically hostile things that actively push people away. But to really figure out more of it, there has been a lot written about this. And like also issues like, we try to be friendly, but nobody from a marginalized group is ever applying to us. So actively seeking out people is one of the ways. But other than that, it's a little beyond my expertise. I've never actually built a team like this. My company has been very small. Our biggest size was 4. So, you don't really have a lot of these issues. But a lot of it also comes from the culture that you build inside. Because people realize that very quickly. Also, that's like North Central, is your issue that people aren't applying? Is that they're applying, but somehow they don't make it through your process? Or do they come to your company and leave very quickly? Those are all, they have sort of overlapping policies, but they are different in ways.
Any more questions? Okay. Thanks for your great talk and your energy and your passion about the whole building community.